This program was made possible by a grant from the Madison A. and Martha Roan Cooper Foundation.
Women in their roles in business and the community have become more important in recent years, and trend forecasters say their roles will continue to expand. Since World War II, the number of working women has increased 200%. More women are in executive positions, have professional careers, are starting new businesses, and are volunteering their services to the community than ever before. In fact, women are entering these areas twice as fast as men. In the past 5 years in Waco alone, 114 women have won the YWCA Pathfinders Award for having distinguished themselves as being first in their chosen fields and having shaped their surroundings so that other women may follow. I interviewed 3 of these outstanding women, each diverse in their fields, to give you a better knowledge of the capabilities of the women of Waco. My first interview is with wildlife rehabilitator Nada Wareham. I visited with Nada out at her farm last November. When I first met Nada, I immediately got a sense of how in tune she is to her environment and how precious that environment is to her. I've always thought of myself as environmentally aware and in tune with my surroundings, but talking to Nada, I realized that my senses were completely muddled, and I found myself having to search for the sights and sounds that seemed to be so evident and natural to her. She always made time to indicate details of our surroundings. She showed us native grassland prairies that have never been plowed. She pointed out fossils embedded in the white rock, and she called our attention to birds she heard in the distance or saw along the fence lines. It is here, at her farm, that Nada finds tranquility. It is here that, in her words, she has a little piece of the world that she can still protect and a part of nature she can be one with. But the farm holds another very special meaning for Nada. She was raised not too far from here, on a farm very similar to this one. In fact, she used to fish further upstream in the same White Rock Creek that trickled beside us as we talked. Even as a child, Nada enjoyed the outdoors and animals more than anything else. She said she would always bring home any stray or injured animal she would find. Well, that love of the outdoors and animals eventually paid off. In 1981, she was the first person in Central Texas to be licensed by the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services to accept and rehabilitate a wide variety of protected and unprotected species. It is on her farm that Nada tells us about her unusual career. How would you define wildlife rehabilitation?
Wildlife rehabilitation is taking an animal that has been injured or otherwise incapacitated, perhaps it's a young animal or an animal that has for some reason been starved down, and keeping it and treating it until it is in a normal state again where it can be released.
And what got you interested in wildlife rehabilitation?
2 things. I heard about some owls that had been destroyed because people couldn't find out how to get them out of their attic. And I thought that was a shame. And I found a bobcat along the side of the road that had been caught in a trap, and he had dragged it a long way, and he was dehydrated and in shock. And I enlisted the help of a veterinarian to get him up where we could treat him. And when we got him up and got him where we could treat him, we found out that there was no one to take him and keep him until his wounds healed so that we could release him again.
Okay. What sort of personal danger is involved with wildlife rehabilitation? I know, well, with birds you can get scratched or even bitten. How about with mammals? Or?
Well, I just finished taking a booster on my rabies vaccination because I had to rehab a little baby skunk. And handling him, he was quite ill, and handling him I would not have felt safe unless I had had my booster. It's important. Great horned owls can shed the rabies virus, and many people don't realize that birds can.
What sort of training and background would you need to start a career in this field today?
I think it would be important to know how to identify animals first, and you would need some medical knowledge.
Medical knowledge for animals or people?
For animals.
Okay.
And you would need to have a veterinarian that would work closely with you. The rules now say that you need to intern with a rehabilitator for a year before you get your own license.
Okay. As more and more women are seeking non-traditional roles and careers, I'm sure that these women are going to be looking for role models, and you're probably going to be one of them. The fact that you've already won the Pathfinder's Award somewhat proves that fact. Do you see yourself as a Pathfinder or role model for other women?
I don't really see myself as a role model. I hope I set a good example for other people that are interested in wildlife and going their own way.
Who were the women or the woman whom you admired growing up?
I think Eleanor Roosevelt is probably the person that I admire the most.
What was that?
When I was young. She was very non-traditional. She was very forceful, and she made a very hard attempt to improve the world. She worked very diligently against some very serious odds.
Okay. What opportunities do you see for women in Waco today?
I think the opportunities for women nowadays are unlimited. I think they will be limited only by their imagination.
Why do you think that has changed over the years? It's become unlimited.
Well, from the time when I was a young girl, I don't think I would have been looked on very highly if I had been doing the kind of thing that I'm doing then, now. And I think now that people would not give it a second thought.
How do you feel about the current trends toward a better ecology and a deeper understanding of the environment?
I'm very thrilled that more people are becoming interested in the environment. The more people are aware of the dangers, I think the better chance we have of really making a difference in improving our world.
In post-Civil War years, voting regulations in Waco stated that everyone could vote except idiots, imbeciles, aliens, the insane, and women. Less than 100 years later, this same city not only had women voting, but they also had their first female mayor, Linnell McNamara. Linnell was elected to be mayor by her peers in 1986. During her time in office, Waco saw some tremendous changes, including the revision of the zoning laws, the establishment of a reserve fund for capital improvements in the city, the development of a plan for moving the Central Texas Zoo to Cameron Park, and many others. I talked to Linnell about women's contributions to Waco in her downtown law office. In 1984, you were elected to the city council, or you ran for city council, and in 1986, you were elected by your peers to be mayor. What was the reason you ran for the city council to begin with?
Well, I found myself at city council meetings a lot because I bought a house in an older neighborhood, and pretty much what happened to the neighborhood was controlled by the city council. And we had old sewer systems, old water systems, old streets, everything was old, and we just appeared before the city council a lot. And I thought, well, maybe I'll be more useful or get more accomplished if I got on the other side on the city council myself. So that's why I ran.
As mayor, were there any issues that you felt like you needed to address that strictly dealt with women's issues?
Well, when I first came on the council, I took a look at the composition of boards and commissions. I think one of the reasons that women have not been involved in city government is because the way you get interested is to participate on boards and commissions of various sorts. We have parks and recreation boards, we have library boards, we have airport boards, we have zoning boards, we have electrical, plumber, all kinds of boards. In fact, we have 200 to 300 volunteers. But we had a very, very, very low percentage, about less than 15% of the people who served on those boards and commissions were female. If you look at the school board, they've had a lot of females for a long time, and people get interested because they serve on the PTA boards and citywide PTA council and things like that, and then they end up running for the school board. Well, that didn't happen in the city, and so one of my goals was to increase the representation of females on boards and commissions to get them more interested in city government and more aware of what's going on, and maybe we would increase the number serving on the council.
Were you successful at doing this?
Yes, we have consistently increased the number of women who are serving on those boards, and I might add that they are doing an excellent job.
As I said earlier, you were elected by your peers to be mayor. How long do you think it will be before a woman in Waco is elected by popular vote to be mayor?
Well, I don't know for sure. You know, society has changed a lot, and there are a lot more women as mayors and prime ministers and things like that, but I think it'll be a while, probably. There was a woman mayor in Dallas many, many years ago when they had a system like ours, and it was about, I think, 50 or 60 years before Annette Strauss was elected as a popularly elected mayor in Dallas. So hopefully it won't be that long in Waco.
What opportunities are available to the women of Waco today?
A lot more opportunities than there used to be, I think. About half the law school is female. There were only about 17 out of 70 in my class when I went to law school, and I graduated in '81. In 10 years, it's been a big difference. We see corporate vice presidents and some presidents in our community. We have women in law enforcement who are respected by their peers to the extent that they are elected not once but twice and 3 times as president of their police association. We see them in all areas of business and social service and education. They used to be very apparent in social service and education, but now they're in business.
In 1987, you won the Pathfinders Award. Do you see yourself as a Pathfinder for women?
Well, I guess you would call it that. I mean, you know, if you're a first in something, you get to be a Pathfinder. I hope that I am a role model for our children, and one of the things that was rewarding to me when I was mayor was that the little girls, I got invited to lots of elementary schools. The guys never got to go to elementary schools to give little speeches, but the little girls remembered who I was, and they introduced me to their mothers when I saw them at Indian Spring Park or stuff, and they were, you know, just real pleased to know the mayor, and I hope that someday one of them will be mayor and be popularly elected.
Did you encourage them to do that?
I absolutely did. I told them, every one, that they could be mayor or whatever they wanted to be.
Great. What woman do you admire most?
Well, I admire a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. I guess I admire what people do rather than people individually. But you know, we talked about this in advance, and I couldn't really think of anybody that I would say I admired the person. But I thought of somebody, and I really think it's Margaret Thatcher. I have been very impressed with the way that she has been able to be effective in a place where women have not had that place before. They've been queen, but they haven't been prime minister. Yeah. And you're born a queen, you rise to become a prime minister. She's been able to go all over the world and be respected in a lot of different cultures. And she has continued to be quite the lady. She's been supported by all age groups. The senior conservative member of the House of Parliament, or the House of Lords, whatever, I had occasion to visit with, who is quite senior to Margaret Thatcher, who was a big supporter of Margaret Thatcher. And he said it changed his whole perception of what women could do.
Wow, that's great. What advice would you give a woman entering the field of politics today?
Well, okay, let me just preface this by saying that I don't think of myself as a politician. Okay. I think I'm a public servant. I don't look at politics as a profession or a trade or an occupation. It should be an avocation. You should have a real job and not just be a politician. And so I would encourage anybody who's interested in public service, as I would call it, to first prepare themselves to have a real job, and then to view politics as something that they volunteer their services for and their time, and that the purpose of volunteering their time for this is to better their community, just like you volunteer for anything that you might volunteer for, whether it's campfire or your church or whatever. But they first need to equip themselves to have a real job.
What are some of the highlights of your career or your time as mayor?
The thing that stands out the most is that I wish that everybody could be mayor, because I learned that you should never say that there's nothing to do in Waco. There was plenty to do the year that I was mayor. There were plenty of places to go. There were plenty of groups that invited me to come to their meetings, their social occasions. I collected a vast array of T-shirts, memorabilia of all of the events that I went to. And I wish that everybody could be mayor just so that they could learn about Waco and McLennan County and what all there is to do here, and how absolutely spectacular the people are. They are really wonderful people, and they are engaged in so many great efforts of all sorts around our community to improve the quality of life for everybody.
My last interview is with one of Waco's leading volunteers, Margaret Cannon Brown. Mrs. Brown has volunteered her services to the community in over 25 organizations, 3 of which she played a vital role in establishing. She has been recognized with 5 awards, including 1974 Woman of the Year and the Liberty Bell Award. When I think of Mrs. Brown, the words that come to my mind are warm, friendly, and down to earth. Her easygoing ways, coupled with her ability to make everyone around her feel special, simply reflect those rare qualities needed in a volunteer. Mrs. Brown explains how she helped establish St. Paul's School, the Cotton Palace Pageant, and the Symphony Bell Pageant, and offers advice to the women of Waco on how to get started with volunteer work. Why do you feel volunteer work is important?
I feel volunteer work is important for several reasons. One, of course, is the fact that you can get, any agency can get help without having to pay for it, which helps the if it's a United Way agency, they can fill their staff and spend the money on other things without having to pay for extra staff. the other side of the coin is that when you volunteer to do something, it enriches your life too, because you learn and you make new friends, and it gives you. I've always felt very strongly that when we are privileged to be educated and to be prepared to do something, we should give something back. And this is a way of giving something back for the blessings that God has given us.
Okay. What were some of the first projects you were involved in your first few years of marriage?
Well, I was involved with the Junior League, and at St. Paul's Church I was involved in we started what we called a nursery guild, because we needed some place to keep the children while everybody was in church. And I think those were probably the two first things I did. I also, when I was with the Junior League, I worked with the child welfare. Sounds like I was doing everything with children. I didn't have any at that point.
What was the child welfare?
Well, that was it was the State Child Welfare Commission, and we placed children in foster homes.
Oh, okay.
It's very interesting, and I enjoyed it.
You were the founder of the first of many organizations in Waco. One of these is St. Paul's Day School for 3-year-olds, which has just boomed into a huge
it's
school.
Exciting, isn't it?
It really is. This organization started out with one teacher and 12 3-year-olds.
Well, actually, we had 2 teachers.
Oh, 2 teachers, okay. 2 teachers and 12 3-year-olds. And today, the program is divided into 2 programs, one for Tuesday and Thursday, and then one on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, with a total of 36 students just in that program alone. And the school itself has increased to 6 grades and has a school population of 240 with 25 teachers. Did you ever anticipate or visualize this?
No, I really didn't. You know, this is another thing that just came from a need. I had a 3-year-old, and I'm a home economics major, and I'd worked in nursery schools, and I wanted a nursery school for my 3-year-old. And the need was there, and so eventually it came about. And the thrill has been to see it grow.
Really?
And I guess it's because it's meeting a need. I've always felt very strongly that Christian education was something that every child ought to have the opportunity to have,
right,
because it's so reinforcing to their lives. And one wonderful thing was when my own daughter, who lives in Dallas, was looking for a school like St. Paul's, because she said that it had given her so much strength. Mm-hmm. And she was only there through the 3rd grade.
Oh, wow.
So we didn't have 6 grades when Margaret was there.
Right. Now, you mentioned the Cotton Palace. Could you briefly describe how you saw a need for the Cotton Palace in Waco?
Well, I'll tell you, that came about really because we needed money for our houses. The Historic Waco Foundation had these houses, and we'd had a pilgrimage, and we'd added an art festival to that. And we were doing great, except that everybody here had already been to the houses 4 or 5 times, or else they'd worked in them. And we needed a vehicle to get people to come to Waco. And we revived the Cotton Palace. Actually, as you may know, was an old festival here, and there were so many people that really had great nostalgia about it, and they kept saying, you know, we really ought to revive this, and wouldn't it be fun if we had another Cotton Palace? So it really came about because of the need to get tourists to Waco and spend their money and go home, and not stay and not that we wouldn't love for people to stay here, but tourism is a wonderful way to create money without creating a lot of other social problems because of population. And that was really the reason we started it.
Okay. And how did you get the Symphony Bill started?
Well, I was president of the Women's Symphony that year, and money.
Okay.
Money. It seems that I have spent a lot of time in my life figuring out ways to raise money. And the Amarillo had a Symphony Bell program, and it had been very successful because you first get a patron, which costs money, and then if you get a patron and you present the daughter as a Symphony Bell, they will either stay on as a patron, and then sometimes they find out they like music. They often go into it just because they want their daughters and granddaughters to be presented. But it's a fun program, and that was really the reason we did it. We needed patrons.
Okay. How have the organizations you have formed changed today? And this is including the Cotton Palace pageant.
They've just gotten better.
Gotten better?
Yeah.
Bigger and better?
Bigger and better. But you know, the more people who are involved, the better anything becomes, because you get new ideas. And you start off with a game plan, and the game plan may be a wonderful game plan, but every year there is a new idea that improves it. And with the Cotton Palace, we've just had our 20th pageant, and only this year they've come up with 2 or 3 new things that have improved the whole system. So they get better because of the people.
Okay. You've done so much in your life for so many people. Was there ever a time when you just wanted to say, okay, I've done enough, it's somebody else's turn?
Oh, Kathleen. Well, you know, you always get that way after you've done a real big job. You think you don't want to do anything for about a year, and then after about 2 weeks, you want to do something else.
Right.
I think it's genes. I just think that some of us like being in. I really like the things I do.
Okay. You've won so many awards in your life for outstanding accomplishments. Among them was the Altrusa Club's Woman of the Year Award, the Theta of the Year Award, Woman of the Year Award, the recipient of the Liberty Bell Award in 1972. And in 1988, you won something that brought you to mind when we did this show. And that was the Pathfinders Award for civic leadership. Do you see yourself as a Pathfinder for women?
Well, you know, you really don't start out being a pathfinder. You start out filling a need. And in everything I've ever done, I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. Something came about and it needed doing, and my family's always teased me a little bit because they say that my long suit is being a catalyst, and I think maybe that's true because I tend to, as a Sagittarian, I'm supposed to be impulsive, and so I tend to see something that needs to be done, and I jump in and start swimming, and sometimes it's something that everybody says, for heaven's sakes, you can't do that, and I don't ask why, but if I see that something needs to be done, I tend to start doing it.
That's great.
And, well, I've been very fortunate, and I've also had wonderful friends who helped me.
For those women who are just starting out and trying to get involved in some civic duties or volunteer work, what advice would you give them, and where should they start?
Well, I think you can start with your church. I think all of our churches now, they're Meals on Wheels. There are a lot of wonderful opportunities in your churches. Then, you know, I think if there is an area of interest, there are never enough people to fill the jobs that need to be filled. I would just volunteer. You know, you ask someone, and most of the time they're so thrilled if somebody wants to work. If they're interested in the arts, you can work at the Arts Center, you can work with the symphony, you can, I think if they're interested in you know, any of the areas that we've just talked about, call up a United Fund agency and ask them if they need some help.
So the key here is to volunteer for something.
I think the key is to be available.
Waco is a better place to live because of the unique individuals that shape its culture, such as volunteer Margaret Brown, civic leader Linnell McNamara, and wildlife rehabilitator Nada Wareham. These individuals have set a standard not only for women, but for all Waco citizens.
This program was made possible by a grant from the Madison A. and Martha Roan Cooper Foundation.